Isabella roamed the countryside in search of old legends and hidden histories. On a crisp autumn afternoon, she came upon an abandoned structure hidden behind towering, twisted oaks. The scent of decaying leaves filled the air, and the building's chipped facade appeared in the distance through the skeletal silhouettes of barren branches. It looked more like a monolithic tomb than an orphanage, but there was a rusted sign still faintly visible on the gate that read Greenhaven Orphanage. Curiosity tugged at her like an insistent child, urging her to explore further, despite the quiet dread creeping through her veins. She sensed the heavy weight of sorrow soaking into the soil, as though the orphanage had been collecting tears for centuries. Cautiously, she pushed open the wrought iron gate, its hinges squeaking in protest like an old woman lamenting the years gone by. The courtyard was overrun with tall grass where crows picked at rotting leaves. The large wooden front doors stood ajar, as though welcoming her to peer into the building's sorrowful secrets. There was not a single sound except her own breath and the drumbeat of her heart. A chill breeze, one that felt unnatural in its intensity, brushed across her shoulders, as if warning her to turn away. Yet, fascination tightened its grip on her mind. She stepped onto the orphanage's wide porch. The boards groaned under her weight. She could not ignore the overwhelming sense of being watched. Disembodied eyes seemed to follow her from dark corners. Hesitation clung to her, compelling her to linger at the threshold. Then, a fleeting claim on her attention. A child's laugh, faint and distant, drifted from somewhere beyond the orphanage walls. It was not a happy sound, but one tinged with fear. A last gasp of joy echoing through Hollow Hall. In the unnatural silence that followed came another sound. Scratching, like nails against wood. Something was definitely alive, or rather, not quite alive, within these walls. Isabella stepped inside. The corridor was long and dark, interrupted only by dusty windows that let in thin shafts of gray light. Her footfalls disturbed layers of dust that rose in swirls around her ankles. Stale air hit her, smelling of mildew and regret. Colorless paintings of wide-eyed children lined one side of the hall, each subject painted so vividly that they seemed to gaze directly at her. The floor was cluttered with the debris of collapsed furniture, broken chairs, shattered glass, and torn remnants of old curtains. She moved gradually, fear climbing up her spine like a spider scurrying up a web. Halfway down that corridor, she noticed a door slightly ajar to her left. She peered inside and discovered a room filled with small beds, each draped in decaying sheets and moth-ridden blankets. A rocking horse inhabited the far corner, its paint peeling, its eyes chipped to reveal splinters of dead wood beneath. Just beyond that, she spotted the skeletal remains of a crib. The bars snapped. The hush here was different, oppressive and absolute. She could sense heartbreak in this room, a sorrow that had seeped into the very floors and walls. She closed the door, returning to the hall. An ancient grandfather clock loomed majestically at the far end, its face cracked, its pendulum seized by rust. Even though it remained unmoving, she heard ticking echo from inside it. The tick-tock was soft, as though muffled by shadows, yet persisted in her ears. She couldn't decide if it was real or some trick of her deeply anxious mind, but it pushed her forward despite the dread pulsing through her. She found another door, the wood bleached by time, leading out to what appeared to be a yard behind the building. The yard revealed itself as a playground. Rusted swings creaked in the wind, chains rasping in tempo with squealing metal. A battered slide leaned to one side. Scaffolding snapped. A trio of seesaws sagged, weighed down by decades of neglect. Across the yard lay a wide sandbox filled with gnarled weeds rather than soft sand. The day's weak sunlight cast elongated shadows, making the playground look like a place belonging to another realm. Isabella rubbed her arms to shake the cold that settled over her. She couldn't help but notice footprints in the dirt. Small, childlike, and fresh. As her eyes followed those footprints, she listened for any sign of movement. Perhaps some living soul remained on the grounds? Or was it her imagination? That same faint laugh, the one that had drawn her in earlier, reached her ears again. This time it sounded unmistakably close and was followed by a faint chorus of hushed giggles. She scanned the yard. No one. Just the swings rocking idly, the seesaws still, the rusted fence boundary caging in dilapidated nightmares. Then one swing swayed violently, almost as though some unseen force propelled it. She gasped, scarcely daring to breathe. Something was among the playground fixtures, something that might not belong to the world of the living. She found herself approaching the sandbox, her steps cautious. The decayed wood of the sandbox frame felt soft under her pressing foot, on the verge of breaking. She stooped to investigate and found a small doll lying in a patch of tangled weeds. Its porcelain face cracked. The doll's painted eyes stared up at her. Their accusing glare made her shiver. She carefully picked it up and turned it around in her hands. A name was scrawled on the back. Marjorie. The letters were faded, but the despair bound to the doll felt startlingly present. She had the growing sense that these ghostly children were real, that they roamed the yard, longing for someone to see them. Suddenly, a scream split the quiet, a high-pitched cry of sheer terror erupting from the orphanage behind her. Isabella stood paralyzed, roiling dread cramping her stomach. Gathering her courage, she whirled around and stepped off the sandbox. The door through which she had emerged slammed shut with a force that rattled the rotting shutters. She rushed to it, her voice trembling as she called, "Is anyone there?" Her only reply was echoes of her own words, as if the orphanage had devoured the sound. That dredging emptiness made the hair on her neck rise. Through a dirty window she glimpsed motion in the hall, a flutter of pale cloth. She hardly had time to make sense of the shape before it vanished deeper inside. The dying sunlight now cast the yard in gloom, forming ill-digital silhouettes at the tree line. One silhouette seemed to move. She traced the outline, her pulse pounding in her ears. Two round glimmers shone momentarily, like eyes that had caught the light. Then they flickered out, leaving the trees in the same dull hush. She backed toward the orphanage door again, hoping to slip inside and find an alternate route or discover whether that cry came from someone in dire need. The door refused to budge. It was locked from within. She rattled it in desperation, her palms sweating. She noticed the playground had gone silent. No breeze, no creaking swings, no rustling leaves. A hush that felt unnatural descended, causing her breath to come in short gasps. In that pressing silence, a voice, whispering, called her name. Isabella's blood turned to ice. She looked toward the slide. Nothing. She looked at the swings. They were utterly still. Then, near the base of a peeling oak tree, she saw the outline of a child, translucent enough that she could see the faint lines of the trunk behind it, yet real enough to cause her heart to race. The child lifted a bony hand, beckoning her. She found her feet, carrying her toward the child, each step weighed down by terror. Finally close enough to see details, she flinched at the sight. It was a boy of perhaps 7 or 8, though his face was wan, eyes large and dark. His hair clung to his forehead in knotted tangles. He wore a torn shirt and shorts, as if from another era. His arms bore bruises or stains, the color faded to gray. He stared without blinking. Then he took a step backward, gliding rather than walking, his bare feet not disturbing the leaves at his feet. "Help us," he rasped. His voice was weak but urgent. Isabella wanted to speak but could not bring herself to form syllables. Her throat was parched, heart thrashing in her chest. The child motioned again, urging her to follow him around the edge of the yard. An inexplicable sympathy pulled her in his direction. She imagined this child left here in despair, needing help from someone alive. She steeled herself and followed his lead, glancing back at the orphanage with its blackened windows. An uneasy feeling gnawed at her. She felt as though at any moment the building might open a set of jaws and swallow everything whole. He led her to a corner of the yard, where a stretch of rusted fence formed a hidden alcove, choked by bushes. The boy reached out, and his ghostly hand touched something in the undergrowth. A quiet lament broke the silence. A moan, or maybe a soft sob. Branches and warped moldering boards parted as though unraveling on their own, revealing a trapdoor leading below the orphanage. A single iron ring hinged to the door dangled slightly, squeaking in a stale breeze. The child pointed at the door. "They're still down there," he whispered. "So lonely." The ground beneath Isabella felt unsteady, as if the earth itself recoiled from the secret the boy was unveiling. She kneeled down and grabbed the iron ring, noticing how unnaturally cold it felt in her hand. The child dissolved into the shadows, leaving only the soft echo of his voice swirling in the cold air. "Don't let them take you. Don't let them play with your soul." She felt a flicker of panic, but her sense of moral responsibility outweighed her fear. Children's spirits or not, need help, and something inside her ached with the desire to offer it. She lifted the trapdoor with a scrape that made her teeth clench. A rank odor billowed out, the stench of rotting wood, old earth, and something else that curled her toes. Decay mixed with bitterness. A stone staircase descended into darkness. Heart-pounding, she reached into her pocket for her flashlight. It cast a pale circle of illumination on the steps, revealing damp stone walls that dripped with condensation. Threads of spiderwebs clung to every crevice. Isabella forced herself down the steps, her flashlight's beam shivering with her trembling hand. She reached a small landing where the gloom was suffocating. Her light fell upon a corridor that appeared carved into the foundation, lined with rotted wooden doors. Many hung off their hinges. Others were sealed shut by time and layers of mold. The overhead beams threatened to collapse at the slightest shift of weight. Her stomach churned. Despite the stale, unmoving air, an undertone of weeping drifted around her, childlike whimpers emanating from the walls themselves. Taking slow, cautious steps, she started forward, calling softly, "Hello? I want to help you." It was a foolish thing to say in this place. Instantly, the lights of her flashlight flickered. The corridor darkened, as if an enormous wing had cast a shadow. She pressed the flashlight switch repeatedly, heart fluttering with dread. When it shone again, she realized the walls were festooned with children's drawings. They depicted scenes of the orphanage, the playground, and broad, shapeless figures overshadowing smaller forms too large to be human, perhaps more akin to demonic silhouettes. In each picture, the children had hollow eyes. A chill settled on her when she saw a depiction of a trap door with something monstrous lurking just beneath it, featureless except for a wide maw lined with pointed teeth. A door to her left creaked open on its own. She pointed the beam in that direction, glimpsing a cramped chamber. She stepped inside to find old toys scattered about, bronze-stained teddy bears, a drum with a punctured head. In the far corner stood a small rocking chair. All at once, the stale gloom was interrupted by a swirl of movement. Numerous small figures, no more than shadows themselves, flitting around the room with soundless speed. Their presence forced her to the side, pressing her back against the wall. The tiny ghosts whispered in unison, "Play with us." Her throat swallowed hard. Their voices echoed from every corner, weaving around her in a tightening coil. She recognized their desperation. To them, she was a living, breathing being who could share in the games they never got to finish. She could bring warmth to the void that trapped them, a comfort they had been denied. But overshadowing their pleas was a darker urgency, as if they heard a monstrous presence that spurred them on. She recalled the boy's warning, "Don't let them take you." She had the impression these playful spirits might be forcibly guided by a malevolent force residing in this domain. Trembling, she said, "I can't stay," and backed away from the flickering shapes. The light sputtered yet again, and she sensed a shift in the air. Something massive stood behind her. She felt its breath like a foul wind on the nape of her neck. Slowly she turned. The corridor ahead had been overtaken by darkness. In that blackness, a pair of jagged white shapes gleamed like half-concealed teeth. She stumbled back into the room, not daring to blink, certain that if she did, the darkness would close around her. A child's voice at her elbow murmured, "It's awake now," with quiet dread. Then another voice from the far side, "You have to run." She spun to see flickers of small faces pressed against the gloom, every one wearing the same expression of terror. Something roared behind them, a wind-like shriek that rattled the beams overhead. Clutching her flash, Isabella dashed back into the corridor, the children's ghostly hands guiding her in the dark. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to move. Facing a series of warped doors, she felt along the walls, searching for a route that might lead above ground. A sudden gale extinguished the flashlight beam altogether, plunging her into velvet black. The children's sobs grew louder. Their fear was tangible. She felt her stomach twist as monstrous footsteps seemed to shake the corridor. Summoning every ounce of courage, she pressed forward through the dark. The corridor twisted, turned, and threatened to become a labyrinth of gloom. Yet, to her surprise, she found a single door at the corridor's end, somewhat ajar, pale light seeping through from the other side. She shoved this door with all her might, heart slamming against her chest. It conceded, draping along the stone floor. The moment she slipped through, she found herself in a small chamber lit by dozens of guttering candles. Their wavering glow stretched shadows across the walls. At the center was a wooden table covered in old books and unidentifiable relics. A twisted chapel of sorts dedicated to malevolent forces. Runes and symbols were drawn on the walls in a dark substance. She cautiously approached, noticing that some markings resembled children's silhouettes while others displayed hideous, shape-shifting beasts. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Something moved in the corner, hunched against the wall. It was the figure of an adult woman wearing a torn black dress, her hair tangled about her face. She appeared disfigured. Her limbs twisted unnaturally, as if bound by invisible cords. A hideous grin stretched across her gaunt cheeks. The candlelight revealed a grotesque reflection in her black, bottomless eyes. She tried to speak, but her voice gurgled with an unearthly echo. Isabella stepped backward in revulsion, nearly knocking over a candelabra. "Don't leave!" croaked the woman. Her voice cut like a blade. She lurched forward, crawling on all fours, a puppet controlled by some demonic puppeteer. Despite Isabella's trembling, she recognized pity stirring within her. Clearly, this was once a human caretaker of the orphanage, or so it seemed. Whatever wickedness had claimed the place had twisted her essence into something monstrous. She advanced, spidery hands clawing at the floor, reaching for Isabella's ankles. Sickening cracks echoing in each movement. Her voice rang with desperation. "We need them. The children. They died here. But they must never leave. They must feed the shadows, or the shadows will feed on us." A thunderous crash erupted from the corridor behind Isabella, jolting her. Another monstrous roar shook the foundation, causing rock dust to trickle from the ceiling. Isabella precisely understood the magnitude of catastrophe that might unfold. She had no plan, just primal fear and an empathic urge to free the sorrowful spirits. Her eyes scanned the table, landing on a large ledger with children's names inscribed on its open pages. She grabbed the ledger, skimming entries written in spidery handwriting. Each page told harrowing stories, admissions dates, frequent punishments, noted illnesses, and sometimes a single final line: deceased, or missing. She realized the caretaker must have kept this ledger of the children she had overseen, then eventually enslaved in death. Every name was a soul caught here, forced to relive heartbreak on the dismal playground above. She contemplated that maybe, if she set these pages aflame, their tether to this place would be severed, freeing them to rest. The caretaker hissed at her, creeping closer like a rabid beast. Isabella dodged one scrabbling hand, knocking over the candelabra. Flames leapt across the floor, leaping toward the ledger. The caretaker shrieked in agony, perhaps sensing the threat of release for the children. Isabella snatched the ledger away from the spreading flame, not sure if simply burning it outright in that moment was best. The caretaker lunged, seizing Isabella's wrist with a cold, inhuman grip. Panic shot through her nerves as the caretaker's milky eyes gleamed. The corridor reverberated again with a monstrous snarl, shaking the walls. Darkness seeped under the door like a living mass, tentacles of blackness creeping into the chamber. The caretaker's face contorted in fear. She let go of Isabella and shrank away, cowering at the approach of that living night. Isabella realized that both caretaker and spirits were subservient to a deeper horror here, a monstrous entity that thrived on the children's trapped souls. Sparks danced on the ground. The caretaker howled. Isabella seized her chance. Summoning courage born from compassion, she thrust the ledger's pages into the flames. The caretaker scrambled to snatch it back, shrieking in despair, but Isabella clutched it tighter, forcing the brittle paper fully into the fire. The room temporarily glowed brighter, with leaping tongues of flame. The caretaker screeched an unholy note as black mist rolled across the floor. The ledger's pages curled, the names scrawled there turning to ash, releasing their hold, or so Isabella hoped. A wave of force surged through the room, blowing out the candles, plunging everything into darkness. Isabella felt the ground shake as the monstrous roar crescendoed, echoing through tunnels as if the entity realized something crucial was being stolen from it. She heard children's voices in a collective gasp, followed by a rising hush. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She waited, breath ragged, for something to crash upon her. But only quiet remained. Then, a soft glow bloomed in the corridor. It took form in a cluster of childlike silhouettes, each luminescent. The caretaker's body lay inert near the table, limbs twisted in final agony. The monstrous presence had vanished. No footsteps, no shadowy maw, no faint breath of malice. The children's eyes shone like faint stars in that cramped darkness. They gazed at Isabella with a mixture of gratitude and relief, as though they finally realized they were free. Slowly, the group drifted down the corridor. Isabella followed, guided by their gentle glow. This time, the atmosphere was different. The basement halls no longer echoed with tortured screams. The dreadful sense of being hunted had lifted. She saw pairs and trios of ghostly hands clasping one another, a final show of unity before moving on. They led her back, step by step, into what felt like the orphanage entryway above. And there was the front door, open now. Above them, the sky had darkened, but the moonlight streamed in pale beams across the threshold. The children reached the threshold of the door and turned back. She thought she discerned smiles on a few of those ghostly faces. Their sorrow had not been erased, but their captivity had. And in that moment, it was enough. One by one, their shapes dissolved into the moonlit air, ascending into an unseen realm. In the stillness that followed, the old building around her seemed to release its final breath, as though relieved of an ancient burden. Though the caretaker had likely been consumed by the entity she once served, Isabella felt no lingering presence, only dust motes drifting in the moonlight, and a hush that sang of closure. She stepped outside, the orphanage behind her, the night's chill wrapping around her like a shroud. Something fluttered at her feet, a small scrap of sooty paper from the destroyed ledger. She picked it up. The single name on it was Marjorie, just like the doll she had found in the sandbox. The ink was smeared, nearly unreadable. She let the paper slip from her fingers, carried off by the stirring breeze. When she reached the courtyard once more, she saw the playground, standing silent as a grave. The rusted swings hung limply, the slide's battered shape bathed in an otherworldly silver glow. She stepped onto the path leading to the gate, her legs nearly giving out from relief and exhaustion. As she passed through the gate that bore the faint lettering of Greenhaven, she felt as though she were emerging from someone else's nightmare. She had won the children their rest, but the sense of the tragedy that befell them lingered in her thoughts like an aftertaste of tears. She took one last glance at the orphanage, now a massive silhouette crowned by a faint halo of moonlight. She could almost believe she saw flickers of small figures waving farewell from the windows, free at last from those dreadful shackles. Then a cloud slid across the moon, plunging everything into darkness anew. She felt a tinge of unease at the thought that evil could be so deeply rooted. Though the children might be gone, she couldn't help wondering if something else might one day awaken in that husk of a building. Yet, as the gate gently clanged shut behind her, she chose to believe that for now the place would remain in a much-needed slumber. Yet, slumber might not be the right word, for such places never truly rest. They stand as harbingers of secrets and tragedies, always waiting for another curious soul to disturb their slumber and unravel their horror. But for this night, Isabella managed to slip away, carrying the memory of those haunted cries in her mind. If you listened carefully in the wind outside Greenhaven, there might still be an echo of a child's distant laugh, or a brief glimpse of a doll's broken face in the sandbox, lost to darkness. She was certain they could never fully leave the world they once inhabited, but at least, for a time, they had found some measure of peace beyond that grim playground, where their laughter no longer needed to be rooted in fear.